morning, welcome to the Young Turks. I'm David Shuster, joined by the fabulous Adrienne Lawrence. We are not Cenk and Anna, and thank God we've got Adrienne here because I'm gonna subject you to some stuff for the next hour. Adrienne, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, how you doing?
I'm doing great. So we've got a lot of fun coming up this hour. We've got Donald Trump is having something of a divorce with Rupert Murdoch. Joe Rogan, go figure, he's a social liberal, but a fiscal conservative. There is child labor underway in the state of Alabama and the Hyundai automaker. And we've got a few surprises at an alma mater, my alma mater, the University of Michigan Medical School. What is going on with the Michigan tolerance for a right to life? Is this a good thing? Does it show that this is a university that is enlightened, or is Michigan somehow losing its mission? Go blue, we'll talk about that in just a minute. But let's get started, here we go. Donald Trump and Rupert Murdoch, the conservative media baron, are apparently going through something of a breakup. The latest sign of political divorce came on Rupert Murdoch's Fox News, specifically the Fox and Friends program. The hosts were discussing some polling involving younger conservatives at the weekend's Turning Point USA conference.
Who would you vote for? And look, the majority said Trump. Almost 79% said Trump, and only 19% said Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, you know, that's interesting. Keep in mind, Turning Point, a group of young Republican conservative activists from all across the country. So you got people from all across the country convening in Tampa. I am thinking about, that is a little different than a couple of other polls that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago in Florida, Blueprint Polling did a poll. DeSantis leads the former president in all age groups.
On social media at 8:19 Eastern time, Donald Trump thundered, "Fox and Friends just really botched my poll numbers, no doubt on purpose. That show has been terrible, gone to the dark side." They quickly quote the big Turning Point poll victory of almost 70 points over the #2 Republican, and then hammer me with outliers. Over the weekend, Donald Trump got hammered on Rupert Murdoch's Fox News Sunday. The show had Liz Cheney on as a guest. She is the vice co-chair and the senior ranking Republican on the January 6th Congressional Committee.
We had a president who sent a mob that he knew was armed to the Capitol to attack and invade while we were counting electoral votes, delayed the count of those votes. And while the attack was underway, it is unquestionable that he did not tell them to go home for hours. And investigating that attack and what led to it, and what we need to do legislatively to make sure it never happens again is our fundamental responsibility.
The pitchforks for Donald Trump on Fox News Sunday followed a remarkable Friday night when Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal and New York Post both published scathing critiques in their editorials of Donald Trump. The New York Post wrote, quote, "As his followers stormed the Capitol calling for the vice president to be hanged, President Donald Trump sat in his private dining room watching TV doing nothing. For 3 hours, 7 minutes, as a matter of principle, as a matter of character, Trump has proven himself unworthy to be this country's chief executive again." Here's the Rupert Murdoch Wall Street Journal editorial. "Mr. Trump has shown not an iota of regret. Characters revealed in a crisis, and Mr. Pence passed his January 6th trial. Mr. Trump utterly failed his." The editorials prompted headlines in several publications, including The Guardian, which headlined, "Is Murdoch tiring of Trump? Mogul's print titles dump the ex-president." In the body of the story, quote, "Observers believe Murdoch, 91, may be tiring of Trump's lie that the 2020 election was stolen, which has both kept Trump in the spotlight and denied him the ceremonial status usually extended to ex-presidents. Murdoch outlets have faced legal repercussions for repeating Trump's lie. A judge in Delaware County recently said Fox Court could be sued by Dominion Voting Systems for broadcasting conspiracy theories related to the 2020 election. Rupert Murdoch and his son Lachlan are named in a $1 billion suit for allegedly acting with actual malice and allowing Fox News to broadcast claims the election was rigged." Amidst the Rupert Murdoch divorce with Donald Trump told the Turning Points USA audience that he, Trump, did such a great job as president that he deserved one of our nation's most esteemed and crucial honors. Watch.
"I wanted to give myself the Congressional Medal of Honor, but they wouldn't let me do it. They wouldn't let me do it. I said, I'm gonna give myself I've always wanted that."
Again, the Congressional Medal of Honor is one of our nation's highest military honors. It is America's most prestigious military decoration that may be awarded to recognize American soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians, and Coast Guardsmen who have distinguished themselves by acts of valor. That's right, military acts of valor. But maybe Donald Trump somehow thought it's something just like an Emmy. In any case, Donald Trump will certainly deserve some sort of honor if in fact he's able to beat back what's coming to him right now from Rupert Murdoch and the Fox News empire and somehow still win the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. Adrienne Lawrence, how does Donald Trump think that he deserves the Congressional Medal of Honor?
Yeah, I think that's really special to think that, this honor that is given for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity and, the fact that you risk your life going beyond the call of duty, how Donald Trump could ever see himself and his bone spores to be included among that class is beyond me. But it does seem pretty on par for this man who lives in this fanciful world in his mind about how great he is. I really do appreciate that Murdoch is finally pushing back since he has been leading this propaganda mill for several years, particularly in advancing Trump. It would be good to actually maybe do some possible journalism at some point in time, but I think that might be too much of a big ask for Fox News. But at least some of this pushback is something I'm willing to go with. I just hope it goes a bit further and maybe decides to hopefully, tell the truth?
Yeah, I mean, there's some people who say, oh my goodness, look at the great stuff that Fox and Friends or Brett Baer did on Fox News Sunday. And in my view, it's not exactly a profile in courage when this follows both the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal editorial pages delivering their scathing critiques of Donald Trump. It seems to me that the folks at Fox News are simply putting their finger in the air and saying, aha, Rupert Murdoch doesn't like Donald Trump, so we'll get on the bandwagon. But I gotta ask you, Adrienne, the question in terms of these lawsuits that Fox News is facing, does it help mitigate at all what Fox News may have to pay out if suddenly they can say, well, look at all the terrible things we've been saying lately about Donald Trump, and we believe that the election was not stolen. Does that change the lawsuit or the way the lawsuit might be perceived?
See, that probably would have been somewhat helpful in terms of an argument at some point in time before these lawsuits were filed. But given that they have already been filed, that they are already several stages of the process in deep, I understand that when it comes to Dominion voting, they are knee deep in discovery at this point. It really doesn't do anything, not at all. Because I think even if you were to present this before a jury and say that X years later, Fox News decided to finally share some facts as it concerns Donald Trump, that's not something that any juror or even judge would find to be in any way mitigating, in part because Fox News has been, again, leading this propaganda mill for some time, getting us in this situation, in this position. And the harm has already been done. It's just a matter of, are they gonna exacerbate it by continue along with the narrative and storylines they've been pushing, or are they going to actually maybe be somewhat socially responsible members of society when it comes to media and dissemination of information?
Yeah, I sort of wonder if Fox News has chosen perhaps the latter, that they want to be perhaps at least welcome back into sort of the media world and just leave it to the Newsmaxes and the OANs, One American News, to sort of go full Trump. The irony in all of this is that we've started seeing when we go out and interview Donald Trump supporters at some of his rallies and some of his events, they started criticizing Fox News literally months ago, saying that the only people at Fox News who are still worth watching are Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson, that Fox News can't be trusted. And when you ask them why, well, they'll say, well, because Fox News is part of the establishment as well, and they're part of the fix. So it seems like Trump supporters have already sort of migrated away from Fox News towards some of these more far right outlets, even though Fox News continues to get huge numbers. And so I wonder if Donald Trump has sort of baked that into the cake in a sense that for him, there's no harm at this point now in criticizing Fox News, whether it's Fox and Friends, or the New York Post, or the Wall Street Journal, or any of other Rupert Murdoch assets, because he knows his audience already doesn't trust them, and Trump has already put the Republican Party in something of a bind, because in order to really appeal now, if you're Ron DeSantis or anybody else, if you want to appeal to the MAGA crowd, you have to buy into the 2020 election lie.
Yep, I definitely think that is the case without a doubt. I also think that Trump is willing to bite the hand that feeds him at any point in time, just because he does have this omnipotent sense and view of himself, and it doesn't seem like he's ever faced actual consequences in life. So to see him lash out at the news outlet that is primarily made him when it comes to this MAGA whole identity, it wouldn't seem smart, especially given how you can see Rupert Murdoch can respond across several platforms. At the same time, we've never known Trump to be anybody smart. So I just really do enjoy this GOP infighting, and I hope it means the destruction of the entire party, but that's just me.
Yeah, one can only hope. Adrienne, there are a lot of people out there who are, when we talk about Donald Trump possibly running for president in 2024, and there is some suggestions that have been made that Donald Trump believes that if he can just win the presidential nomination, win the White House, he gets to install his own attorney general and he puts an immediate halt to whatever Department of Justice investigations of him have been underway for January 6th. I know that the Department of Justice does have a slightly different standard in terms of prosecuting somebody who's running for office as opposed to somebody who's no longer in office. But can you explain to people exactly sort of where that line is in terms of, does it really help Donald Trump with his criminal defense, if that's what he's facing, if he is an active presidential candidate, as opposed to if he is not a presidential candidate and decides to sort of ride out into retirement?
Okay, so generally, there's a lot of concern at DOJ in terms of prosecuting a former president and also prosecuting someone who is potentially running for office unless you have something airtight, and especially given how divisive our nation is. But the thing is that DOJ also swore to uphold the Constitution and the law. So as far as I'm concerned, that should be your guiding light. You should not in any way interject politics or fear of all sorts of ramifications if you were to actually do your job. The point is that it gets done because that's how our system is supposed to work. And so it's really upsetting that there is, to some extent, this unspoken fear / rule, the thought that they don't want, the United States doesn't want to be in a position where it is prosecuting former presidents because we've been involved with so many other nations that have done that with their former world leaders. But when you have someone who has actually committed a crime and it is egregious and it is factual and well supported, you are supposed to prosecute to show that no one is above the law. So as much as the US may see itself in a catch-22, as far as I'm concerned, DOJ needs to catch some courage and actually just do its damn job.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the damn job would also include handing it to a grand jury and letting a grand jury look at all of this. I was struck, and we played the Liz Cheney soundbite. There are a couple of people who have suggested, Republican supporters of Donald Trump in the legal world, who say, look, the fact that Donald Trump did not do what he should have done morally on January 6th, that's still not necessarily a crime. That inaction can't be considered a crime. But there's also the argument that, wait a second, there's so many other steps that he did take in terms of calling for the January 6th rally, for suggesting that maybe the Secret Service should let people in with their weapons, that you can still make the argument that perhaps he was part of a criminal conspiracy to block the activities of the US Congress. How do you analyze this?
Oh, without a doubt. The thing is if he weren't a former president, then he would be prosecuted already without a doubt for conspiracy, because there seems to be enough evidence to show that they took an active step forward into engaging in this coup-like behavior, and that there is plenty evidence such thereof. And so that would show that they are all involved. All you need is more than one person to knock someone for conspiracy. And there's clearly a web of people involved here who knew exactly what would go down on January 6th, the president included.
All right, well, we're gonna see where Donald Trump and the Department of Justice and everybody goes with this. But in the meantime, let's move on to our next story.
There's a bunch keeps you from being a Republican. Yeah. But that's one of the, like, people will say like, oh, you're a secret conservative. Like, you could suck my, you don't know what the you're talking.
What did he say? You can suck my what? Well, during a rant against Republicans' efforts to end gay marriage, that's right, Joe Rogan supports gay marriage and he supports abortion rights. He slammed his critics for calling him a secret conservative, but in the same breath, Rogan seemed to debunk himself. Watch.
I'm so far away from being a Republican. Yeah. Just because I believe in the Second Amendment, and just because I support the military, and just because I support police. Like, I was on welfare as a kid. I think it's important. I think having a social safety net is crucial. Yes. It's crucial. We should help each other. We're supposed to be one big community. I'm a bleeding heart liberal when it comes to a lot of.
There it is.
I just also believe in discipline and hard work.
Yes.
That's where I fall into the more conservative side.
And but that's okay.
But I'm not a person who wants to like keep all my money and not pay taxes.
That's something of a fiscal conservative, but definitely a social liberal. While Rogan may contest the fact that he is a right winger, a majority of his viewers, guess where they stand? They actually identify as Republicans. A recent Morning Consult poll found more than 7 in 10 avid Rogan fans are men, and a similar share are under the age of 45. About half of avid Rogan fans identify as Republican, and even more describe themselves as conservative. So what is it that makes the Joe Rogan universe flock to his podcast? Well, even before the headline-grabbing Spotify controversy that has made him perhaps an unwitting figurehead for extremist rhetoric, hundreds of health experts complained that he was frequently spreading COVID-19 misinformation through his massively popular podcast. Then a jaw-dropping compilation video of Rogan saying the N-word 24 times in the 12 years of his podcast then surfaced. And here are a few more examples in terms of the criticism deserved of Joe Rogan. Anti-feminist, he tweeted, "If you're a man and you call yourself a feminist, I hope you choke to death on vegan pizza while crying over a Lady Gaga song." Misogynistic. In the know, Joe Rogan faces backlash for laughing about his friend coercing women to perform oral sex. Homophobic. Joe Rogan says gay and transgender people are most vicious champions of cancel culture because they've been bullied and want revenge. Transphobic. Caitlyn Jenner slams Joe Rogan for transphobic rant that bashed the Kardashians. An anti-vax, a menace to public health. Doctors demand Spotify put an end to COVID lies on Joe Rogan Experience. And by the way, unlike many platforms, Spotify does not have a clear policy prohibiting misinformation. 370 physicians and scientists are hoping to change that. So this idea, Adrienne Lawrence, that Joe Rogan can somehow be, it's fine for him to be a social liberal, progressive liberal, but he's conservative when it comes to financial stuff. Does it really matter if he's got as little class and as little sense of, morality as he seems to demonstrate?
So many people want to play this labels game. They want to play like their teams when no, it's not how it works. Joe Manchin talks every day about what being a Democrat my ass. Like, I don't care what you label yourself as. How do you conduct business? What are you doing? And all I've seen from Joe Rogan is nothing but absolute nonsense and shenanigans, especially things that align with white male supremacy, ableism, and hate. And if you are feeding people who also subscribe to that kind of mentality, again, you can call yourself whatever you want, but I see you for what you are, and I am going to say, go ahead and do you, but do you at a distance from me.
This whole idea of rhetoric, us versus them. This is a way for Joe Rogan, and it's also a way a lot of conservative media, Fox News, OAN, the rest. They say, look, we are out against the world, and be part of us, be part of our team, and we're going to fight. We're going to stand up for what's right, and we're going to demean, by the way, people who are other, people who are are not white, maybe aren't male, maybe aren't necessarily originally from this country. And what they do is by creating this division, it essentially acts as sort of an adhesive for people who are feeling somewhat lost, maybe people who have lost their jobs or people who are looking for somebody to blame, somebody to scapegoat for their own problems. That's how Fox News is able to get an audience. It seems like on many issues, that's the way Joe Rogan gets an audience. And I guess what's so troubling to me, fine, if you want to be a fiscal conservative, if you want to be a progressive liberal, that's fine. We all have our complexities when it comes to the issues. And nobody, I think, is doctrinaire when it comes to progressive on everything or conservative on everything. I think people are far more nuanced. But where I have a problem is that when Joe Rogan uses such misogynistic, hateful language, regardless of what his positions are, then he's somebody who just doesn't care about fellow humanity. And if you don't care about fellow human beings, if you don't care that every person has some value regardless of their background, then it doesn't really matter whether if you're a progressive on abortion rights and or gay marriage, you are a hater. And in my view, there's no room for haters when it comes to progressives and standing up for our fellow citizens. But in any case, I guess Adrienne, it doesn't hurt his podcast, right?
No, of course not. Because if anything, Joe Rogan definitely knows how to go to the highest bidder.
Well, is there anything that can be done? I mean, Spotify, and again, a lot of people keep talking about. There's got to be some way to get Spotify to have some sort of standards. Is there any legal requirement on Spotify? Is there anything somebody can do in terms of suing them or trying to go after whatever licensing they may have to say, look, you cannot be spreading misinformation?
You know what, I would like to have something like that in the rule books, and it'd be great, but to be able to balance it out with the First Amendment right is really difficult, especially also because they're private parties. And so, they can share what they want to share, really do what they want to do internally. If you find yourself on the receiving end of something that is discriminatory, that violates the Civil Rights Act, that's the way they can get a lawsuit, but also the the kind of remedies there are extremely limited. This is one of those situations where it's really just the power of the people and the power of the purse. If people wanted to boycott, they could. We did see that during the pandemic, but it wasn't significant enough to get, Spotify to do what's right. We do know that we did see Joe Rogan make some changes, I believe, and they removed some of his content. But it's just, we need our society to do more and do better, without a doubt.
Amen. And we could do a lot better by having, more, valuable, more ethically sound podcasters and radio hosts than Joe Rogan, who seems to traffic in a lot of hate and a lot of labeling of a lot of people, even as he gets angry when people attach a label to himself. In any case, the show's going to continue after this break. Let's go to a break, and I'm going to read some member comments. Really? Here we go, right after this. Who am I and what am I doing here? Well, at least I've got Adrienne Lawrence to explain it to me. Adrienne, I think, is playing the role of Anna, and I think I'm supposed to be playing the role of Cenk. Is that about right, Adrienne?
Nah, to some extent.
Adrienne, what's your alma mater, your undergraduate degree from?
Undergrad is Sac State, Cal State Sacramento.
Cal State Sacramento. Well,
correct.
My undergraduate degree is from the University of Michigan. And unfortunately, this next story is about the University of Michigan in a way that I would not prefer. So let's get right into it. Medical students at the University of Michigan Medical School walked out of a white coat ceremony over the weekend. The ceremony is a traditional event in which medical students essentially introduce themselves to medicine. This year's keynote speaker, though, at their event was Dr. Christian Collier, a U of M assistant professor who is known to hold anti-abortion beliefs. And when she took the podium during the ceremony, watch what happened.
Good afternoon. I'm quite honored to have been chosen as this year's White Coat ceremony speaker. I'd like to extend.
In addition to being a professor, Collier is also the director of the U of M Medical School program on health, spirituality, and religion. She has shared several posts on social media expressing an anti-abortion stance, including messages on Twitter in which she claimed her way of being a feminist involved fighting for her prenatal sisters who have been subjected to what she claims is the violence in the act of abortion. Holding on to a view of feminism where one fights for the rights of all women and girls, especially those who are most vulnerable. I can't not lament the violence directed at my prenatal sisters in the act of abortion done in the name of autonomy, she wrote in May 2022. Over 340 medical students signed a petition opposing the choice of Collier as the event's keynote speaker, according to a report by the Michigan Daily, the student newspaper, together with 72 community members, including University of Michigan medicine's residents, physicians, graduate students, and alumni. Quote, while we support the rights of freedom of speech and religion, an anti-choice speaker as a representative of the University of Michigan undermines the university's position on abortion and supports the non-universal theology-rooted platform to restrict abortion access, an essential part of medical care, the petition reads. But the university reacted to its decision to have Collier as a keynote speaker of this event, telling Newsweek that it could not revoke an invitation to a speaker based on their personal beliefs. This is the second straight week in which a very prominent member of the University of Michigan family has been roiling the university over pro-life stuff. Last week, it was head football coach Jim Harbaugh, who spoke at a Right to Life event in Plymouth, Michigan. Plymouth is not near the Ann Arbor campus, it is off campus. Nonetheless, Harbaugh and his wife raised money for pro-life charities throughout the state. Harbaugh said, quote, I believe in having the courage to let the unborn be born. I love life. I believe in having loving care and respect for life and death. My faith and my science are what drives these beliefs in me. Harbaugh is a devout Catholic. Full disclosure, again, I'm a proud University of Michigan alum. And this one is tough because I believe very strongly in a woman's right to choose, and I believe the freedom of choice represents the best in humanity, represents progress, represents enlightenment, which is what the University of Michigan is supposed to stand for. On the other hand, Jim Harbaugh is not in charge of campus medical services, and this Professor Collier, despite her personal beliefs about abortion, it has not changed University of Michigan policy towards abortion or reproductive services one iota. So I give some credit to my alma mater for trying to foster debate and being inclusive of all points of view. I do believe that university students particularly should be exposed to points of view and opinions that are different from their own. But I also believe very strongly that university students should engage in peaceful protest, which is what they have done at this white coat ceremony for the medical students. And surely there will be some protests in Ann Arbor this fall outside Michigan Stadium by a lot of people who think that Coach Harbaugh should simply stick to football and beating Ohio State if he can manage that, and stay away from the issues of our time that have to do with politics and policies, including abortion. Adrienne, your views about where the line is in terms of public, so these are public employees, I guess. I mean, they have every right to their personal views, but they're also ambassadors of a public institution.
Okay, so first of all, having that institution say they couldn't revoke the invite once they had sent it, what they're essentially saying is because it's bad manners. They're trying to stick to this whole decorum ideology that is the same part of the problem, this whole white coat ceremony, this thought that it's unprofessional for you to walk out. What they're trying to do is trying to maintain the status quo. And this is something that we hear from a lot of people in positions of power to try to shame you for doing things that break this sense of what's professional. Because we don't want you talking back. We don't want you speaking back. We don't want you protesting in any way because it upsets decorum. That's how the status quo loves to operate when it comes to serving the oppressed. And so to have the school say we could not pull back the speaker Collier is just incredibly problematic and an absolute lie and excuse. And then on top of that, to have this individual up here giving this speech in some way also just speaks to the ignorance of the moment. The fact is you have so many medical care providers who are now in positions where they cannot put their patients' health first. Their oath is being jeopardized. The things that they stand for, the principles, including pharmacists are going through this as well. They are angry. So having people walk out because the oath that they are going to swear to take or have taken is now being jeopardized in a way where they can't put individuals' health first, that is a damn good reason to protest as far as I'm concerned. And they're lucky that those people simply walked out and did not use their voice or something else to push back.
I agree 100%, and I'm so glad that those students did walk out with their white coats and that there were the 370 people who signed the petition, because I do also have some questions whether the university you really couldn't find somebody else at this time to actually deliver this key speech at a white coat ceremony. A white coat ceremony is a big deal. I mean, for people who get into medical school, this is a big event. It's almost like a graduation, although it's not really a graduation, but it's got that same sort of level of prestige. And to try to force, I mean, people who literally are committing their life to believing in science and medicine, and they have to somehow sit there and listen to somebody who's so strongly anti-abortion. And I guarantee that there are going to be some of these students who maybe go into OBGYN or whatever it is. They will find very early in their career when they're gonna deal with somebody, a woman who's pregnant, who's having an ectopic pregnancy, a pregnancy where the uterus, where the what's in their womb is literally not gonna make it. And then the question becomes, okay, well, I suppose you could wait for this naturally to be expelled, but your life might be in danger, or let's go ahead and have a procedure done so it's taken out cleanly. And yet there's state after state that are saying, no, even women whose health and life might be in jeopardy because their pregnancy is not gonna make it because it's a miscarriage. These states are saying to these women, no, you can't get an abortion. And then the doctors are now in a position of having to say, well, wait a second, if the state is gonna restrict me from performing this procedure on women, well, what do I do as a doctor? And so, I mean, Adrienne, I've got a friend who's actually on the national board that certifies medical students in procedures like abortions, and it's a real dilemma for this national board because now they're having to deal with trying to decide how do we certify doctors in states where the law says that they can't do this. How do they know that the doctors are going to be able to practice and actually be able to get the training and be able to perform this technique, which will save women's lives?
Yeah, it is a very bad situation to be in, especially because the vast majority of these laws and whatnot, they are not based on science, but pseudoscience and very ignorant understanding of how the body works, and they are regressive. And it's unfortunate because, again, so many people took the oath to preserve life. They're in this game as healthcare providers to ensure that people's health are protected and ensure that life is preserved. And so to take that power away from them and say you have to wait and watch someone suffer and potentially die before you can do something, or you risk losing your ability to be a healthcare provider, a medical provider, that it's incredibly unfair, it's wrong, and it really does reflect how regressive the United States has become.
Agree, very aggressive. And I would say, look, I'm gonna have a lot of friends who are gonna say, Shuster, we know you're a college football fan. We know that you love the University of Michigan. What about Coach Harbaugh? What does this do to the team? The team, as Bo Schembechler famously said way back in the 1970s and 80s. Look Bo Schembechler up if that's a generation that's too old for you. Football is about the team. Football is about not creating distractions for your athletes. Whether you're a professional team, whether you're a college team, whether you're a high school team, you don't want the drama of somebody who's getting arrested, somebody who's saying things out of context, who's criticizing a fellow teammate. So in my view, when people say, well, what about Coach Harbaugh? How has he helped the University of Michigan football team? He has not. He's actually hurt the team, because I guarantee that there are gonna be players in that locker room who either have a girlfriend who's pregnant, or a sister who gets pregnant, or a mother's got an ectopic pregnancy, whatever it is. And their position on abortion is gonna be, no, this belongs to a woman to decide. And when they look and see that there's their head football coach, a guy who never should cross publicly, is out there publicly defending restrictions on women's rights, to me, that harms the unity you're looking for in a locker room. And I know Jim Harbaugh said, oh, but at halftime, I tell everybody, you're here because you want to be here and you have to stand by your positions and fight for what you believe in. Well, that's fine, but this is football. A football locker room is not the place to have your political fights. It's not the place to have your fights over issues like abortion and other social issues of the day, because then you start to divide your team. And the moment your team is divided, then you start to pile up the losses on the field, because the players either don't trust in one another or they don't trust in their coach. So bad move by Jim Harbaugh, just in terms of coaching, regardless of what his views are. And I respect the fact he's Catholic, his views are not new. I get that, and he can hold the views that he wants. But as a football coach, your primary responsibility is to create a team, to create unity. And Jim Harbaugh, I believe, has torn some of this down. And I think the repercussions are actually gonna be more severe than a lot of football fans might necessarily imagine. This is not a good sign. And oh, by the way, Coach Harbaugh was troubling enough for a lot of us in only beating Ohio State once in 10 years and losing several years in a row to Michigan State. You're really pushing the button with us now, Coach Harbaugh. Do better. So that's it. Adrienne, you have a thought?
It's just, I think it's interesting how people will push their religious principles and views upon you as opposed to not doing that when it's not their job to do that. And so I think that's very interesting how this man is making millions upon millions of dollars, and yet he still feels the need to push on others the ideologies that he happens to hold out of his religious beliefs. I think it's really irresponsible and just kind of sad.
I agree. And he was invited to the Right to Life fundraiser because he is the head coach in the University of Michigan, the winningest college football team in US history. It's because he's at the University of Michigan, they wanted him there. So he is using his platform, or the Right to Lifers are leveraging his being at that platform in order to raise money. That's my issue. If Jim Harbaugh were a private citizen, we're not affiliated with the university, fine, do whatever you want. You want to coach the Minnesota Vikings as he wanted to, go for it, knock yourself out and then speak to Right to Life organizations. But when you are hanging yourself up as, I am the head coach of the University of Michigan, to me, that's where actually going and speaking at Right to Life fundraisers is a huge problem and divisive, and doesn't represent what this great university should stand for. A university that, by the way, it's such a compelling university, and they got 88,000 applications for 11,000 spots, which is unheard of for a public university. A lot of folks are now describing Harvard as the Michigan of the East, just something that we used to call it way back when. But anyway, enough promoting the University of Michigan. And I got my colleagues are like, oh my God, Shuster, cut him off. So okay, let's go to a commercial break. I'll read some viewer comments, and I'm sure these are gonna be doozies, and you see me with my glasses on if I can find them. More after this. You're watching The Young Turks with David Shuster and Adrienne Lawrence. Adrienne, it's still illegal for children to work in factories, right?
To my knowledge, yes.
All right, so with that, as a clear backdrop, let's head to our next story. A factory in Montgomery, Alabama that made parts for Hyundai vehicles has been exposed for using child labor. Underage workers, in some cases as young as 12, have recently worked at a metal stamping plant operated by Smart Alabama LLC. Police, the family of 3 underage workers and 8 former and current employees of the factory, said Smart, listed by Hyundai in corporate listings as a majority-owned unit, supplies parts for some of the most popular cars and SUVs built by the automaker in Montgomery, its flagship US assembly plant. Alabama and federal laws limit minors age under 18 from working in metal stamping and pressing operations such as Smart, where proximity to dangerous machinery can put them at risk. So how did we find out about this? Well, Reuters, which is the international wire news agency, learned of underage workers at the Hyundai-owned supplier following the brief disappearance in February of a Guatemalan migrant child from her family's home in Alabama. The girl, who turns 14 this month, and her 2 brothers, aged 12 and 15, all worked at the plant earlier this year and weren't going to school, according to people familiar with their employment. Their father, Pedro C., confirmed these people's accounts. Police in the C's family town of Enterprise also confirmed that the girl and her siblings had worked at Smart. And it wasn't just these 3 kids. We don't know the exact number, but Pedro C's children were among a larger cohort of underage workers who found jobs at the Hyundai-owned supplier over the past few years, according to interviews with a former dozen and current plant employees and labor recruiters. Several of these minors, they said, have foregone schooling in order to work long shifts at the plant, a sprawling facility with a documented history of health and safety violations, including amputation hazards. By the way, Alabama law requires children 17 and under to be enrolled in school. One former worker at Smart, an adult migrant who left for another auto industry job last year, said there were around 50 underage workers between the different plant shifts, adding that he knew some of them personally. 50 underage workers. Another former adult worker at Smart, a US citizen who also left the plant last year, said she worked alongside about a dozen minors on her shift. While we don't know how much the minors were paid or any other terms of their employment, and Hyundai has responded to these troubling reports. Quoted a statement sent after Reuters first published its findings on Friday. Hyundai said, "It does not tolerate illegal employment practices at any Hyundai entity. We have policies and procedures in place that require compliance with all local, state, and federal laws." It didn't answer detailed questions from Reuters about the findings. In a human rights policy posted online, Hyundai says it forbids child labor throughout its workforce, including suppliers. And yet, unsurprisingly, Hyundai and Smart are both passing on the blame to contractors and hiring agencies, which are very, of course, popular and used frequently in the automotive industry. Smart, in a separate statement, said it follows federal, state, and local laws and denies any allegation that it knowingly employed anyone who was ineligible for unemployment. The company said it relies on temporary work agencies to fill jobs and expects these agencies to follow the law in recruiting, hiring, and placing workers on its premises. Smart did not answer specific questions about the workers cited in this story. Now, according to current and former Smart workers and local labor recruiters, many of the minors at the plant were hired through recruitment agencies. The police force in Enterprise does not have jurisdiction to investigate possible labor law violations at the factory. Yes, even though kids are working there, the police say they can't do anything. Instead, the police notified the state attorney general's office after the incident. But it seems as though the state has been rather nonchalant about the allegations until recently. Mike Lewis, a spokesperson at the Alabama Attorney General's office, declined to comment. It's unclear whether the office or other investigators have contacted Smart or Hyundai about possible violations. On Friday, in response to Reuters reporting, a spokesperson for the Alabama Department of Labor said it would be coordinating with US Department of Labor and other agencies to investigate. The former Assistant Secretary of Labor for OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, is hoping consumers will revolt against Hyundai after these findings. Quote, "Consumers should be outraged. They should know that these cars are being built, at least in part, by workers who are children and need to be in school rather than risking life and limb because their families are desperate for income." First of all, I don't fault the children. I don't fault the families. Clearly, they're struggling. They're looking for work. They're looking for money. And of course, they're gonna be younger people, teenagers, other folks who wanna work. And if there's a job at a factory, they're gonna go for the jobs. But why on earth is an American company, Smart, which is subcontracted to Hyundai, how are they allowing this to happen? This is outrageous. We don't allow child labor, nor should we in the United States, in factories, automotive factories where there's lots of moving pieces and parts and there's dangers of having your limbs cut off. And that's where you're gonna let children work? I mean, fine, they want to work at the ice cream stand, they want to work a summer job at the pool as a lifeguard, okay. But in a factory that's stamping out parts for cars, really? Adrienne, what do you make of the Alabama response here?
You know, this isn't 1910. We should not have children working in factories. That's why Alabama has a law saying minors younger than 16 can't work in manufacturing environments. And it's clear that's smart. Based on this report, that Smart decided that that law does not apply to them and that they prefer to have children work there. And it's probably because they can pay them less. And that's what they're looking to leverage, because that's generally it when we have these companies engaged in illegal behavior and having individuals, particularly individuals who are not documented, within the folds when it comes to workforces, so that they can exploit the fact that those individuals can't necessarily run to law enforcement because they may not be documented. It's an exploitation situation. And this Smart plant in particular, it has been cited for repeated safety and health violations, including amputation risks. So this plant knows what it's about. And to be honest, based on the allegations, it damn sure seemed to know what it was doing. We also want to bear in mind that local law enforcement authorities didn't have any jurisdiction to investigate the child labor law violations that are alleged at that Smart plant. They had to turn it over to the state's attorney general's office and to the federal level. So that also adds another layer of making it more difficult to be able to weed out these legal violations that are exploiting young children. But the fact is that we need more entities, and also we need consumers to start holding these entities accountable, because like Hyundai, even though it's directly its plant, it is contracted with Smart. And we also know that Hyundai is one of the world's most profitable auto manufacturers, pulling in $9 billion in revenue just last year alone. So the money is there. It's a matter of, is the will to not exploit children present, and it doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, I wish everybody would say, wait a second, was my car a Hyundai car? Was it built with parts from Montgomery? Because then maybe Smart was involved. And look, I get that the automotive industry is based on subcontractors and supply chains, and for all the workers who actually technically work for a Ford, a GM, a Hyundai, there are literally 10 times as many workers who are involved in either stamping out parts or designing machine tools or the design process that are technically subcontractors. Still, to me, Adrienne, there's a certain level of liability that maybe one could conceivably bring against Hyundai. And let's just suppose, God forbid, some kid at this Montgomery plant, 12, 13 years old, loses a limb at this Smart factory. What is the liability issue that they might be able to bring against Hyundai, even though Smart is technically a subcontractor?
Oh, they're gonna sue Hyundai. You always sue the largest pockets available, and you just throw it against the wall and see what sticks. And so you let Hyundai and Smart and whoever else is on the other side of the V figure out who is liable. And I'm sure they have various indemnity provisions, and there may also just be basic common law provisions that may exempt Hyundai, but that don't matter. You go ahead and you sue them anyways. Because also because of the potential for bad press, Hyundai may be happy to give up some coins or to do something to ensure the matter is settled, and then hold Smart accountable for the behavior. But the reality is, again, we need to ensure that this is something that is addressed not only in the court of law, but the court of public opinion, because these companies do not fear legal settlements or adverse verdicts. They fear consumers not patronizing their businesses anymore. And so this is about the people using their voices.
Does the level of legal culpability go up in the future? In other words, look, Hyundai's now on notice, Smart is on notice based on the Reuters reporting that this practice is going on. It's been going on for some time. There are clearly witnesses who have talked to police, who have talked to Reuters, the Wire news agency. If Hyundai does not even, establish some sort of committee to investigate this or come up with some practices that it's going to demand of its suppliers and its subcontractors, 6 months from now, if there's an incident, does that mean that their culpability becomes even greater?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you can argue all sorts of legal theories about their knowledge, especially if they happen to know of previous instances, yet they did not do anything and they continue to contract with Smart. And there are so many things that you can point fingers to. It's just a matter of it needs to be pointed and it needs to be done loudly. And people do need to hold Hyundai accountable, because the thing is that even if they're not legally liable or they couldn't be proven to be legally liable on the hook, you want them to be smarter about who they do business with. You want them to be accountable by virtue of the fact that they are giving money and opportunities to Smart. They're creating this environment where children can be exploited and they're able to profit off of it. And so for consumers to hold Hyundai accountable is what is necessary, needs to be done, so it makes better business choices for who it chooses to partner with.
And I also hope that the community of in Alabama, the local communities, reach out to these families and find out, well, what is it? Why are the circumstances so dire that these families now have to try to go and have their kids get factory jobs? I mean, what is that all about? Are there not other employment opportunities? And granted, I'm sure factory jobs, manufacturing probably pays a lot more than if you're, scooping ice cream cones or working as a lifeguard. But are there other opportunities for the kids, or are manufacturing jobs at the local plant that's helping the automaker? Is that the only place that some kids and some families can really turn to for financial help?
It's my understanding that in this Montgomery County, so let's see, the median household income is $49,000 and about 20% live below the poverty line. Also, I believe the community is about 60% Black, 30% white. So it's not necessarily wealthy or necessarily very prosperous at all. It definitely seems that the community struggles to a large extent, but it's also my understanding that a lot of these young children who were found in this facility were children who were undocumented or their families had come here. And so that tells you that is a level of exploitation that is going on there. Primarily also just given the nature of the communities around this factory, it's not flourishing. It is not doing well. There aren't a lot of opportunities, and there probably aren't a lot of people in positions of power who can speak out and make for meaningful change. And especially when you have local law enforcement that just throws its hands in the air and says, sorry, we can't do anything about it.
A lot of people are throwing their hands in the air when it comes to conservative politics and abortion rights. So let's go to our next story. Younger conservatives may be looking up and seeing, wow, their party, the GOP, is almost like that dog that actually managed to catch the car and has gotten its snout smashed in. Last week, all but 8 Republicans in the US House voted against a bill that would protect access to contraceptives. Republican opposition to the bill surprised no one except the conservatives, younger conservatives, who voted these politicians into office. Here's a sample. Farting Tacos, a conservative, says, why vote against HR 8373 birth control bill? Okay, my ignorance is showing. I'm looking at HR 8373 and having a difficult time reading it because all I hear in my head is Nancy Pelosi's shrill voice as if she were reading the dang thing. Why would anyone vote against the bill? I've been a conservative my entire life, and even I would support something that ensures that a contraceptive was available to anyone who wanted actual family planning services. Are people concerned that abortions would be considered contraceptives? Is it a gateway during drug kind of situation? I've got to be missing something here. Insights and thoughts. There's some more thoughts. Oh, by the way, that post got almost 2,000 upvotes, so a lot of people agreed. Here's some of the comments on that post. Birth control has literally prevented more abortions than any other entity, hands down. It's true. Bobby Wake writes, it also prevents a lot of STDs. Maybe that is the reason. High Caliber Mitch, another conservative, it's not even a government will pay bill. Deomed One wrote, who was voting against this? I really want to know. I will be watching my Republican congressman regarding this. My mother and I are conservative and fully support it. We believe birth control prevents abortions. It's a good thing. Environmental East wrote, because we are on the wrong side, follow the money. Birth control is acceptable. Same as voting against pot. We're getting left behind. Our causes are being lost because our leaders are stuck in 1900. Someone else writes, I never thought leopards would eat my face. Sobs woman who voted for the leopards eating people's faces party. By the way, in terms of the polling, Americans massively support access to contraception. That won't come as much of a surprise. Birth control enjoys broad public support. A large majority of all adults, 86%, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, and political affiliation and region, support access to all methods of contraception. Nearly 9 in 10 adults, 87% agree that everyone deserves access to the full range of birth control methods, no matter who they are, where they live, and what their economic status is. Adrienne, for the last couple of years, a lot of women's rights groups have been saying, you know what, it's not gonna be just we're banning abortion, except in the cases of the rape, incest, and life of the mother. They're gonna go full ban on abortions. And a lot of More centrist Democrats said, no, that's not what the Republicans want. The Republicans will never commit political suicide by going that far and by banning all abortions and by banning contraception. And that's what they're doing in state after state. The evangelicals, the right-wing Christian fundamentalists have said, okay, we got a victory at the Supreme Court. Let's go even further. So the people who were worried years ago have been proven right. And a lot of Democrats, in my view, have been caught asleep at the switch.
No, absolutely. It's like there have been so many of us out there who have been speaking truth, and it's just so incredibly weird because people, of course, they don't want to listen, but now they're going to be in situations, especially this one in particular, where if you lose access to contraceptives, all of a sudden, as a man, maybe you thought this doesn't bother me because it doesn't impact me, but all of a sudden you're going to be stuck with some kids you don't want. How's that going to go for you? Like, it just, there are so many people out there who have buried their head in the sand, who don't listen to people, who don't listen to experts, don't listen to people who have dogs in the fight. And then they're just stuck on stupid, and all of a sudden they're shocked and shaken. And I'm just, I really don't have anything more for them. It's like, you don't listen anyway, so why am I going to exhaust myself again by trying to educate you about what's to come? Just, suffer the consequences. The crummy part is that it's going to be people like me and people who look like me who are going to suffer the most. It's just a matter of so many people didn't want to do a damn thing about it when they could. So I don't know.
I remember 25 years ago during the Clinton administration, I think it was Bill Clinton who said something like, we need to make abortions less necessary. And that was his way of saying, let's have more sex education in school. Let's make contraception more readily available. Let's pass out condoms at community centers. Let's make sure people know how to use contraception. And Republicans who said that they were against abortion didn't want to go there. They didn't want to talk about contraception. They didn't want to talk about birth control. And some of us, I think, in the media just said, okay, well, this is too squeamish of an issue for them. Maybe they're worried politically about their evangelical base. And so they just don't want to talk about it, even though when you talk to most Republicans away from the cameras, they'll say, of course, we believe in contraception. Of course, we believe in birth control to prevent unwanted pregnancies. But now, the Republicans are stuck. It's like now we found out, no, Republicans really just didn't want to address the issue. They didn't want to address birth control. They wanted to go a lot farther than abortion. And so for younger conservatives in particular, and Adrienne, I've had a couple of friends now who have said they have family members who are, one family member who's not going to go to Tulane University in Louisiana because that's a state that has some of the most draconian laws against reproductive rights. Somebody else who's not going to go to school in University of Texas Law School because of the Texas abortion. So it feels like this is the next step. That okay, for Democrats or progressives, yes, we lost at the Supreme Court, but now there's a price that we can exact on these institutions and on people by using the power of our pocketbooks and wallets to say, okay, if you're a state that's going to do this, then you're going to have to pay.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact is that's going to hit our economy, our GDP, everything about how we do business is now going to tank. The problem is that a lot of us states, many of us blue states have been sustaining the rest of the nation, Callie, what's up, are going to have to bear even more when everyone else starts going under, when people don't want to go to certain states, when those institutions and businesses start falling apart. And it's unfair because also the decisions they're making are unwise. They are curbing people's civil rights without having any good reason whatsoever, other than wanting to maintain this faux puritanical nonsense upon which our nation is built, even though it does nothing more than wax poetic to the ignorant. And I am tired of it. The vast majority of Americans are tired of it. But if they don't start voting in a way that doesn't focus on uplifting white male supremacy, we are simply going to get more of it.
I agree 100%, and I feel like this is so. There are a lot of reasons to be embarrassed and by the United States, by our racist past and present, by the way police have disparities in how they treat white people and black people, by the incarceration rates and the differences, and also the way our society has treated women for so long. And so many of us thought, okay, but we were making progress, and we have been making progress, and now this is like such a giant step backwards. It's humiliating. It's embarrassing. Whether you go around the world and in other countries, people in other countries say, what is wrong with America these days? What was once supposed to be this sort of shining beacon on a hill, shining light on a hill, and now it's going dark. It's like America's headed back to the medieval ages, and women this is not a safe place for women anymore. That's where this country has become, and it's a crying shame. And hopefully there's enough of us who will stand up and act and take action, whether it's direct action by voting and participation, or whether it's action we're using our wallets and our pocketbooks to make sure that society sees there is a cost for going backwards, and the cost should not be borne by the least among us. In any case, Adrienne Lawrence, star of Rebel HQ and so many other platforms. Adrienne, how can people find you?
All right, you can definitely find me on Rebel HQ, which is on YouTube and Facebook, as well as on Twitter at Adrienne Law, Instagram at Adrienne Lawrence.
Adrienne, thanks for helping our audience get through this hour. I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, Shuster, but at least they had Adrienne Lawrence along for the ride. So that softened the blow a little bit. In any case, Adrienne, thanks very much. Coming up in our next hour, Francesca is gonna take you through. Cenk and Anna are still on vacation in hour 2. On behalf of everybody for hour 1, I'm David Shuster. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.